Now, if you're here for the comic books, I totally understand, but I wanted to show this book off because this is a book that I believe every comic book artist owns or should own or owned at one point, whatever it may be. And I mean, this is Bridgman, the man, the myth, the legend. One of the most important art teachers of all time. So many artists in comics use Bridgman because everything that you learn in this book is extremely helpful. I've covered this book before, sort of, in my like how I learned figure drawing video, which I'll link, or I'll just put it at the end of the video or something. But this to me is like the Bible if you want to be a comic book artist or an artist in general. Even if you want to do fine art, if you want to make like Frazetta work or something like that, or do illustration or whatever it may be, even if you want to be like a fucking graphic designer or something, like you should definitely pick this book up because there's so much useful information when it comes to obviously figure drawing, if that's what you're going to be doing. And I totally 100% believe that every artist in comics uses this book. So I'm going to do kind of like a skim through and kind of go over some pieces and bits that I think are helpful. There also are like mini books that you can go through as well, if you want to pick those up. But this is like kind of the complete thing. This is where you get everything included. I mean, this goes over things like how to put the head in perspective and, you know, things like that, like where things would be. I mean, when I figured out that form, here, I'll take a pencil. When I figured out that form of that forehead going across, like going back like that, that was huge for me. And that chin coming there, and the chin being itself, like being its own form itself on top of that jaw, super fucking important stuff. What about the placement of the ear? And you find out that the ear goes on this plane, and then the eyes go on that plane, and the forehead goes on that plane, and the chin, or the jaw, excuse me, starts on that plane, and then it goes over there, and then the chin is like on. So like you learn these things, and then there's that chin under there. Super important stuff. It teaches you like forms of the face. Very, very important. But the thing is that Bridgman also teaches you that on different parts of the body as well. There is useful information like on rhythms and, you know, how to build the figure correctly. There's pretty much like, I would say probably like, I don't know, like 40 pages maybe on just how to get the rhythm of the body or what the forms of the body should be. There's actually a really important part. Where is it? Probably should have planned this beforehand. Like things like this, like teaching you that like the neck is round, the shoulders are square, the rib cage is round, the pelvis is square. That overlap of that leg, super fucking important. That took me a long time to understand that this overlaps the pelvis, the square of the knee, the triangle of the bottom of the leg, the square by where the ankle is, and then that triangle for the foot. The arms, like the way he draws arms, he draws them very square, and then he draws them into you know another square, and then that wrist is a square. Very important stuff that if you want to be an artist, you kind of have to learn that stuff. It teaches you like the basic parts of the body. Then he goes into things like shading of the head and telling you where like how the neck moves and how to draw, you know, this muscle that goes into the clavicle, I think is the word that I'm thinking of. Sometimes I forget the anatomy. Or that goes into the pit of the neck, excuse me. And then how it all connects and how it has like this form. And the way that you tackle this book is you literally just draw everything that's here. It teaches you things like the jawbone, how the jawbone moves back and forth. My only thing about this book is if you've never drawn before, or you're not a very, like, if you can't figure out things like form, like, so basically the way that Bridgman works is he teaches you how to take basic form and then make it more advanced. And if you don't understand things like how to draw like simple forms, like how to draw like the mannequin, it's not a very useful book. It's probably going to confuse you, actually. This was a book that I opened up very early into my drawing career, and I was very confused by it. But if you understand like the forms, like the basic forms or the basic shapes of the body, and like how, you know, like basically this, if you understand this, but now how to mannequinize it, you're ready for Bridgman. Bridgman basically teaches you how to do this with anatomy. He goes over the mouth, how it's, you know, more rounded or cylindrical. Very important stuff. He teaches you how things like the shoulders work, and how like the shoulders are kind of like a pulley. That's the best way I could describe it. Or the I guess the clavicle, how it's like a pulley system, and how it has like this very, like, when you turn it, you know what I mean? Hopefully that makes sense. Even goes into things like how you can use like basic ideas or things that you have around, you know, like how it works, how it moves. And then he goes into like where the muscles are and how the muscles are shaped and how they're going to go around, and the separation of the muscles. I mean, very, very useful stuff. He goes over the bones, obviously. Hands, very difficult to learn how to draw. He also teaches you like how things lock into one another. How you sort of have that muscle that connects between here, and how you kind of lock one piece into another piece. So you lock the top of the arm into the forearm. Very useful stuff. Even teaches you how to shade it and how it should be in form. I mean, if you've ever, like, David Finch is a big Bridgman guy. You can definitely see, or like Jim Lee. Jim Lee is also a Bridgman guy. Jim Lee actually literally just draws Bridgman drawings. If you're a fan of Jim Lee or a fan of pretty much any comic book artist, a lot of guys use Burn Hogarth or bring up Burn Hogarth, but there's a lot of Bridgman in their work usually. I think they kind of, maybe they use Burn Hogarth for style, or, you know, but Bridgman is more solid, whereas, you know, Burn Hogarth is more like, I don't know, like more balloony, I guess, or like rubbery in some cases. If you want like a more solid foundation, Bridgman is definitely the guy. You know, there's that old, you know, I guess fairy tale about how somebody told Frazetta about Bridgman, and he spent the entire night studying this book front to back, and then he knew how to draw anatomy. I don't think that's actually a true story, but people love to fantasize, I guess. But you definitely will learn a lot by going through this book. I mean, teaching you parts of the hands, how the hands work. Hands are very difficult to draw, but I mean, I love how it's this very like solid form, going for like the tip of the finger, going into the middle of the finger, the bottom of the finger. The problem with anatomy books is they kind of get confusing, because you're like, do I need to draw each and every part of this? Just do it, and then eventually you'll figure it out. It will start to click. Drawing is one of those things where when you do it enough, it just somehow randomly one day it just clicks. Like you're just like, oh, I understand how to draw, you know, the thumb now, or the fingers now. And you might draw 100, 200, 300, 400,000, whatever drawings of the fingers, and they're all bad, and then one day it just sort of clicks. And you know, when you have that ability to observe and have great observation skills, because you'll get that as you draw more, it definitely will click. I mean, you see things like when I first started out, I probably wouldn't have noticed this, I wouldn't have noticed how there's a bottom plane here, and then a piece goes in there, kind of like a belt, and then it overlaps a part back there. Overlapping also is another thing that he goes over. Super important. So I would definitely say, if you're going to study Bridgman, overlap, basic understanding the basic mannequin, understanding basic forms, like understanding that the hand is kind of like a trapezoidal weird thing, where the bottom part, and then you have this wider part of the top. You know, understanding little things like that, super important. And then you go into Bridgman. He even goes over how the bones move and shit like that. So super important. Like telling you that there's 3 parts, right? There's the top. There's that middle part. You can't even see it in your fucking hand if you look close enough. There's that top part, that middle part, and then there's that bottom part. And they all move in their own way. I mean, you figure things out by looking at it. Super important stuff. Bridgman is the man. Going over things like the pelvis and the movement of the pelvis. Muscles of the hip. Muscles of the leg. You know, and even numbers them, where you can draw them in and figure out how they work. But again, you have to learn how to be able to understand that that's, you know, I like to do the cube instead of the cylinder, but some people like to do cylinders for the legs. Totally fine, however you want. Or you could start with the cube and then turn it into a cylinder, however you want to do it. It obviously depends on how it's facing you, what the shape will be, but some shapes are a little bit easier than others, and then you just put those forms over. And it sounds simple, but it's obviously not. You know, you have to understand how the forms work and how to draw the forms, but you learn that by looking at Bridgman. You know, see how there's a top there, and then there's a piece overlapping it and coming down, and you have this cube, and then you have this cube under here, and then it's overlapping that middle area. Just little things like that. He also goes over locking into one another, like how pieces lock into one another. Yeah. The only thing I will say about Bridgman is that Bridgman is very difficult. Like the writing in the book is not very helpful, but I would definitely just, you know, read it at least one time through. I'm a big novel reader, so this wasn't a very difficult book for me to read. It's funny, I read novels, but I don't read comics. I guess I usually don't read comics unless it's like exceptional. But yeah, just read it through, and it probably won't make sense. It'll probably make more sense than Burn Hogarth. Burn Hogarth is very confusing, but Bridgman is just confusing because I feel like, I don't know if the book was an idea that came out after he passed away, I'm not sure, but Bridgman is the man, and even if the words don't make sense, the drawings will. And then he goes over things like drapery. But super helpful stuff in here. My book has gotten a lot, and I mean, this is probably a nicer version than most people, but I have other books. I keep a Bridgman book by the side of my bed, and I read it. I keep a Bridgman book in my work area, and then I keep a Bridgman book right by the side of my I keep one like by my computer, and then one by my my drawing table. So I have like 3 places I put them in, and then I have the other ones, the little small ones, and I just go through those. But this contains pretty much everything in there. I think there's some extra stuff in there, but yeah, I mean, this is really helpful. Going over the forms of the face, super important. Showing you like how things overlap one another, and how, you know, there's a cylinder for where the mouth goes, and, you know, you sort of have this flat shape depending on which way you're looking at it. I mean, he goes over how it looks from almost every angle. Even goes over the muscles of the face. Super helpful stuff. I love these drawings. But yeah, if you are a comic book fan and you just kind of want to understand, like if you have no interest in drawing but you just love comic books, this is a cool book because you can kind of understand what the artists are doing. But if you want to draw comics, or you want to do comics one day, I mean, this is a essential book For anybody who wants to make comics, I prefer this book over Byrne Hogarth or Loomis or Hampton, even though they're different. I would definitely say do not pick this book up if you like have no drawing experience. But if you do, you understand basic things like forms and perspective. All you really need to know how to draw is cubes, cylinders, spheres, and you're pretty much there. You pretty much have everything you need to draw, and obviously understand things like gesture. Like I said, he goes over rhythm somewhere in here. I don't remember. He even goes over like proportion, how to measure proportions. But there are also videos that you can find on YouTube that people dive really deep in this book. But this to me is the essential book that I can guarantee you every comic book artist owns or has owned. I mean, I look at I look at Frank Miller's Ronin, and I could see Bridgman in there. The other person that I always see Bridgman in is Romita Jr. A lot of Bridgman. The same thing with like I said, Jim Lee. A lot of Bridgman there. I mean, pretty much, like I said, he pretty much just copies Bridgman drawings and then puts like bat ears on it, and he's like, oh, that's Batman. But yeah, I can't imagine if you're an artist, you haven't picked this book up or don't know this book exists, but I can promise you that if you've ever read a comic book, that artist probably had this book right next to their table. I can guarantee it. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Pick up a copy of Bridgman's drawing from life. It's the essential book.